It's good to have you though, Dad. And so, what's your title?
Oh,
You're a research scientist. That is that. What would you go by?
oh, yeah, I guess, yeah, you could say that. I, my actual title in in
Present company,
in
maybe,
the
or
companies, yeah, and is either CEO or president, and because Tommy's CEO of Draconis Extraction Technologies, and I'm the chief science officer also, and the position that I always make sure that I get is secretary treasurer because I want to control the money.
absolutely. Um, well, you've done a lot of work because I've grown up along, with you and moving around the country, and you're always working with different people. A lot of the money you've made is through royalties, license fees, patents, and so on. Correct?
Yes,
And it's all with really in the sense of inventing technology, or working on these different processes. A lot of them are chemical like processes, and so you would move the family around a lot to be closer to maybe a business partner or to start a company, and but what going way back, what influenced you to go down this route? Was it I know you served in the army. Was it your father? Was it someone you met?
it,
What was
it
the
was a little boy that was born in 1985.
uh,
Because I didn't really plan to do any of this stuff. I actually didn't really have an appreciation for business or any of that. I enjoyed going to school. I enjoyed reading science articles and stuff like that. But the idea of getting into commercial, you know, business, like, going to work for IBM or any of the big companies at the time, just didn't really appeal to me. But when you were born, and of course, followed by Mike and Kevin, I decided that I needed to do something to make sure you guys had a decent life because my father had done had provided us a very nice life. We weren't rich, but we certainly weren't poor. We had everything that we needed. We had a boat when we were growing up on a lake in Orlando, Florida. So I decided that I was going to do it, but I, I think I made a mistake because of my lack of really wanting to deal with people and be in business myself. I, I chose to license the technology under exclusive licenses. And then every time that somebody got an exclusive license, they immediately, well, maybe not immediately, but they very soon afterwards, they wanted an assignment because of they couldn't raise the money with a license. They needed an assignment, stuff like that. And I did that. Now, I've made good money. I can't complain too much. And you guys had a good life growing up.
what
But I also got screwed quite a bit by going that route.
early on? It was with International Technologies. Was that the company? I can't remember the company that you used to
Yeah,
commute
there
to.
were several. There was International Technologies, I think, that had been uh, global something.
It's all right. That doesn't really
Yeah, it
matter.
doesn't
It's
make any
just
difference.
I remember as a young kid growing up in Southern Illinois, you commuting to Chicago to work with different business partners and the company at the time there, and but I was always fascinated with your work, and I traveled with you.
Yeah,
I remember. I remember when you were receiving an award there in Chicago. I think it was for a patent.
yeah,
You received a big plaque. It was Ed Ponder, right? Was that the
yeah,
gentleman? Yeah.
yeah.
What was the technology that you were working on then? It was the or can you talk about that?
Yeah. Oh, Oh yeah, yeah. That was the thermal depolymerization process.
I remember. I just wanted you to say it.
I forget the exact technical thermal depolymerization and chemical reforming process and apparatus, something like that.
Oh, for the
Yeah,
patent.
we worked on that in Northbrook, but I have to say I was really disappointed because I had to leave and go up to Chicago, and I'm not a big city person, but so and I had to drive to Northbrook and back in the and terrible traffic. I mean, Chicago has terrible traffic, and I would I actually got to where I would just wait at Northbrook until around 7 o'clock, and I'd wait at the office. Everybody else would leave, and then the lab there, and then I would drive back because I hated traffic, but and I hated leaving you guys because I got to spend all the early time with you guys, and Kevin probably missed out on the most because he was probably only 2 or 3 years old when I went to work.
Yeah, but I mean, you were working like like someone has to do to support a
Yeah,
family and to support yourself. But I mean, you moved us around the country, and whenever we could do something, almost everywhere we lived, we ventured out as a as a family and did stuff. Or
yeah,
you took us all over. I mean, I got to see most of the country. In my younger years because of you and Linda, my aunt. And so it was great. And at the same time, all your schooling and the things that you loved, science, and you would point stuff out, what, the soil
yeah,
sciences, the geology. I mean, and you'd explain what you were working on. And I just remembered, running around in your labs and looking at the equipment, the condensing coils and the reactors you're building, all the different things.
yeah, yeah,
And I always had and because of that, I've always had a huge fascination for technology and engineering and science. And it's yeah, I think it's a great thing for a kid to experience and
yeah,
it's so cool because you were trying to solve problems, trying to research things and make sense of stuff. And so I always had lots of questions, like I do
yeah,
today.
yeah. And that was yeah, that was early on too, where you're talking about, and that was a great change actually. What you're talking about, being able to run around in the lab there in Grand Tool, because they actually had raised enough money in international technologies, and they were leasing that 6,000 square foot lab. So it was a huge place for you guys to play in and to watch. Me, and I had a lot of room to set up different things.
Yeah, because we had moved,
So
we
yeah,
had we had
so
moved from yeah,
and I got to be with you guys, and
yeah.
so that
It
that
was
that was great, and that's one of the things that I was going to go into a little bit ago, but Kevin kind of missed out because you and Mike both got to travel with me up to Chicago to the Gas Research Institute, different places like that. Kevin didn't get to do that because by the time Kevin was old enough to do that, I was working in New York with Changing World Technologies, and they didn't really want you guys around, and that
yeah.
kind of
I
irritated me. I wasn't. That was probably the most unhappy I was in the whole time.
yeah, it's business partners. Um, yeah, it's can be a greedy world out there. It can there's a lot of challenging things. I mean, for the listeners, and people, we had moved from Southern Illinois to Central Illinois, where we were, my father and I were talking about this, running around in his lab, and we were closer, of course, to Chicago, but also, you were working in that lab on Chanute Air Force Base, which was Used to have, I think, one of the largest government buildings in the country, like the third largest government building,
Yeah, yeah, Whitehall or something.
Whitehall. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
it was huge.
it was huge. And Octave Chanute. And yeah, and then of course we were closer to your mother and father and the rest of the family there because most of the family lived in central
Yeah, that was
Illinois.
good.
You, your dad was Army Air Corps, and during World War II, he was more or less he was a flight engineer and had a background in you know, doing things with his hands and working on aircraft. And did that didn't have any kind of influence, you think?
Oh yeah. Oh no, no doubt it did. As a matter of fact, he taught me a lot of the electrical principles and stuff that I actually learned later in the Army Corps Engineer School. So yeah, I was very prepared. No, he was a genius in electronics and mechanics, and I don't know how much you know about this, but he actually uh, he troubleshot or did the troubleshooting on all of the planes that were deployed during World War II. Uh, Not so much the fighters, but the big bombers.
Yeah, like
He worked on the B-24, and
he,
then he worked on the B-29,
yeah.
and I think he worked on the Mitchell bomber. I can't remember. It was a B-32 or
There was
something
a B
like that.
25, B 17.
It might have been the B-25, and so anyway, he did all of that work, and the B-29s, they put him on those when they deployed them, and he went with those B-29s. They flew over the what they call the hump,
The
the
Himalayan
Himalayas.
mountains.
Yeah, and flew to China where they were flying missions to
Japan.
bomb Japan. And the B-29s, they were brand new then,
They had the
and he had
range.
actually been back in the United States working on them to get them ready to go, and then he went back to the war zone with the B-29s into China, and they had a issue that they would fly so many miles, and it said that they had to adjust the valves. And so they would adjust the valves the way that they did, the way that the tech manual said to do, which was just like adjusting the valves in any other plane that he had worked on previously. But every time they did that, those engines blew up when they were,
Huh.
and they lost planes that way, or they were crippled and had to turn around and couldn't complete their mission.
Sure.
So he when he went very carefully through it because he thought maybe the men were not doing it right. So he went very carefully through it, did everything just like the tech manual, and they sent that plane out, and the engine blew up, and he came back. He told the all of the flight mechanics for all of the squadrons that were flying the B-52, I mean the B-29s, to not adjust the valves on the engine. If the engine reached its time, replace the engine with a new engine and send the old engine back to the United States to be repaired. And they flew all their missions. They had no problem. It was a tremendous uh, airplane and tremendous engine. It was actually a very good engine. It was, and after the war, they came out in the tech manual. They made a edit, a change to it, and a correction, and they said that it was a floating valve system, and that was the first one I think that they had ever had,
Hmm.
and so that was the problem with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the B 29 was manufactured for the range to more or less to bomb Japan and to go
Yep.
further. I mean, than some of the other bombers that were in you know, that were in existence at the time.
But yeah, just to go back a little bit more, he also did all of the first jets. he was a troubleshooter, and he worked out the problems with all of the first jets, even the fighter jets that were made. He was in Mexico and Southern California
Yeah.
doing all of the work on those jets. And he worked on I think the B-58 Hustler and
I can't recall.
B-52.
Yeah.
And he worked on some of the early missiles. The precursor for the cruise missile was the Bulldog. It
Yeah.
was launched from the B-52.
He's definitely was an influence,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah, and I want to add this. He worked on every one of the ICBMs, which were also the space rockets, and we saw them all launch in Orlando, Florida,
yeah,
all the way
there's
up to the Saturn V. And
some big rockets.
yeah, he worked for Martin Marietta, and they did all a bunch of different electronic systems and stuff.
It's no, yeah, I would have had a lot of uh, questions for him,
Yeah,
but
he loved to talk to you.
he did. I remember always visiting the house, his house, and sitting at the dining table or in the living room, and he would talk about things. It was great,
Yeah,
especially.
you guys are very lucky because you had the nicest grandma and grandpa that you could.
They
Because
were. It was.
they were both very, very loving and very sweet, and they loved you guys so much.
Well, they
Your
took care of
grandma
us.
told me one time, she said, Paul, I don't know what you've done, but your children are the sweetest, nicest children.
Well, I was. Yeah, I mean, it was. I think just like you said, your dad took care of you. You took care of us, and it. That's all that needs to be done, really. I mean, and we got to see a lot of the country, like I said, and like we always, we didn't have everything necessarily. I mean, as we grew older, you made more money, and we, slowly like had, got bigger, I guess, a bigger home and everything. But I mean, that didn't really matter. I mean, the experiences we had along the way meant a lot, and but the we when so we I remember the way I remember everything is, we were living in Illinois, and we moved a number of times, so more than just a few times in Illinois, but we made a move to Arizona. There was what was the work that was going on there at the time? Because I don't really recall
That was the beginning of changing world technologies.
that's right.
CWT was actually named for a guy named Charles William Patterson. No. Charles William Troutner.
Okay.
He was a banker. He worked for Moody, and he was in Chicago at I think it was a Hilton or a Sheraton. I don't remember exactly. I'm thinking it was a Hilton, but
Sure.
he was out running and he came back. He was jogging for his health. That's kind of a sad story, but he was mugged, hit in the back of the lower back of the head with a iron pipe, and it paralyzed him. He was in a coma for a long time, and he had vision problems because of that. And he actually he didn't have good balance. He was pretty messed up all the time that I knew him, but he was a nice guy, and him and Jim Patterson, which you might remember,
Yeah.
they got together because you didn't see Chuck very much because he wasn't real healthy. But I think we stayed at his house once or twice in Phoenix.
Sure.
At least once, I think you guys went
It's
with me.
so long ago.
At his house,
But I remember the names.
yeah. So, but that's where CWT came from, and we just called it CWT at that time. But I just kind of funny you mentioned that because I just found the license assignment and some other documents that were signed by Jim Patterson, who was the CEO of the company at that time, and for the thermal depolymerization process.
Yeah, and so, but CWT also had more or less had it was the acronym or abbreviation Changing World Technologies as well.
Right.
But
Yes.
that's it. That's interesting
Brian
though.
Appel changed the changing world technology.
I see. I see. But I don't think I knew about the name, the abbreviation, or I just forgot. But
Yeah. Well,
but then we moved across the country shortly after. Was that when the year or right around that time the company was formed, when we were in Arizona, or was it right before
no, the company was formed actually while we were still in
Illinois?
Rantoul,
Yeah.
when I had moved out of the other big lab and moved to that office building that I bought. It was actually an old store, old Army surplus store.
Yeah.
Uh,
But you're running your tests and you're doing.
yeah.
Why don't you explain that technology to people? Like what was the thermal depolymerization process? Or
It was just a process that we were originally designing to work with organic material, like waste from landfills, because they were passing laws in the 80s.
or agricultural too, even, right? Like turkey
Yeah.
offal. Yeah.
Anything that's organic. So that's what our primary aim was at. But when we were in Northbrook, the first thing we ran, I think because somebody agreed to put some money in to the company with Ed, and but they were interested in coal. They wanted to know would it work with coal, and I had no idea, to tell you the truth, if it would work with coal. So we put coal in it, and we started up, and this is when we just got the system. It was called a PAR reactor. They actually call them bomb reactors, but
it's not the greatest name.
Connotation.
It's not. back then I guess they did. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think one of the things they used them for early on was these experiments that they would do to determine the calorific value of something, that they would charge it with some material like coal or something, and then they would pump peroxide, really strong peroxide into it, and it would like react violently, and they would measure the temperature increase or
Sure.
so. I don't remember exactly, but we didn't use it like that. We ran high pressure, not real high pressure, 600, 800 psi.
Uh-huh.
And but we had just got that reactor set. It was a real nice set. Had ceramic heaters, so it could go up to 1750 degrees. And
The one that was mounted,
much higher than the system I have now.
the one that was mounted to the metal bench, correct? That
Right.
system.
So it actually it didn't have all the other stuff on it that you saw. It just had, it was just a reactor.
The reactors, yeah.
So they wanted me to run a test. Well, I said, well, this isn't really the way that the system should run, because it's supposed to run at a high pressure and then go to a low pressure and then go to a very high temperature. And all I could do was run one pressure because it wasn't all set up.
Sure.
So I ran the coal, put the coal in it. I ran it. I heated it up to like 600 degrees Fahrenheit. So first time I ever ran anything in that. And then the only thing I could do was let it cool down and open it up. And Al Schatzel goes. So I opened it up, and you could smell kerosene. It smelled just like kerosene.
Huh.
It was really interesting. So a lot of the coal had been converted to volatile organics, but they were all locked inside the coal still. But you could pick up the pieces of clumps of coal and smell them, and they smelled like kerosene. And just like kerosene you would buy, or diesel fuel. And he said, "Well, I guess it doesn't work, does it? All you're going to get out of the coal is a thimble full of oil, because there was a little bit of oil down at the bottom." And I said, "Well, Al, that's not the way that the process is supposed to work." And I said, "I got to have a condenser on it, and the stuff that like what was drawn up for the patent."
To
And
cool a
but
condenser.
Bill was really busy at that time. They had an Amoco project for their Amoco's headquarters, doing the sound systems. They did all kinds of stuff. Those guys, but the I guess you'd call it the PA system, but it played music through the whole building, and
Yeah, PA, so intercom, PA
yeah,
system.
So they had designed all the, you know, the balancing of everything, where the speakers would be and all that stuff.
Sure.
Bill was really clever at the math stuff, and so was Al. He was a physicist, so they were on that type of stuff. But so I went to the hardware store and I bought me some iron pipe and a whole bunch of these fluted washers, and I put the ends on the pipe so I could connect some stainless steel tubing to it, and I put all these fluted washers on it to act like a heat exchanger. And Bill and I go, what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, if nobody's going to build this for me, I'm going to build it. So Bill had finished what he was doing, and he came over and he helped me hook that up. And so he hooked it up, and I put the coal in it, and I ran the coal again, and it was Indiana. It was Illinois basin coal, but it was from Indiana.
Yeah.
It was a soft coal.
Sure.
It was really, it was like the best coal that I think I've ever run, to tell you the truth. And it was perfect for doing this. So anyway, I ran it, took it up to high pressure. I cooked it. I took out the water, took it through the heat exchanger that I had made from iron pipe. Oh, and Al had said, that iron pipe is going to rust away like crazy. That the sulfur in that coal is going to destroy that iron pipe. So I said, well, all it has to do is run a few times, and we'll stick a stainless steel pipe on there. But so I ran it, and I took the hot gases out. We took it up to about, I think only 1,000 degrees, to tell you the truth, the first time. And when I took the oil out, the water came out first, and I took, we had a little, tiny thing that we would fill up these, sample tubes.
Yeah.
Little sample
test
glass
tubes, sample tubes, yeah.
Yeah. And so I filled up a whole bunch of them with water, because they only hold like 20 grams or 20 mil, no, maybe more than that. About 25, maybe 30 mils, something like that. So there was 500 grams of water in there. So it took, which is 500 mils. So it took,
a while.
However many times divided into 500, there was a bunch of them. And then the oil came out. And the oil came out, it foamed like root beer. I swear it was the wildest looking stuff. And Al was like really freaked out. And I took about 10 of those out. So, it was pretty good oil yield for coal. It's one of the best that I ever got.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, that iron pipe stayed on that system the whole time I was in Chicago, and it was even on that system, I think, when we got to Rantoul, and it was eventually changed with a stainless steel tube type.
Spiral condenser.
Yeah,
condenser
spiral coil, which you probably remember seeing.
Oh, yeah.
And and so, and I think actually Dave did that change. And that pipe sat around, and I dragged that around several places it may still be around somewhere. It never rusted.
It's a thick piece of iron, probably. I mean, it
No,
might.
it's just there's something about the way the process works. The sulfur doesn't come out in a form that's highly corrosive,
I
so
see.
it just doesn't seem to attack the.
But you were getting
Metal.
oil basically from this
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
process,
yeah.
and
Good,
then
good
and
oil
then
from
it
that.
turned into. I guess you were testing other kind of organic material
Oh,
more and more.
we tested everything that there is. Tested plastic, tested rubber, tested
I
fats.
know ConAgra
We
and
actually ran in Northbrook, Illinois, up in Chicago, while you guys were down in Southern Illinois. We ran, and even when we moved, no, I think we did most of that up there. But we ran probably more tests on fat from a Kraft food plant in I think it was maybe Decatur or Springfield, somewhere like that. Than we did anything else. All their waste fat, triglycerides and stuff. It made beautiful oil. It was really tremendous.
and so I know that some of those that process was featured in Fortune magazine and on the History
Mm-hmm.
Channel.
Magazine, Scientific American Science magazine. Yeah.
Yeah. From there, though, we left. You decided for different reasons, to leave that company, CWT, and set out again on your own to do things elsewhere and work on other projects. And so, what have you been working on, since then, and how is that developing? What is that developing into now?
Well, yeah, we did. We left New York right after 9/11. Actually, that I think it was probably December of that year, 2001.
It was January, I think, actually.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, it might have been.
January of
If it was
2002.
January, it was January. It was early
It
January,
was
like the
very
first.
early January. I think that's what I kind of recall, but it may have been December. It was December or January.
It was the end of December. I think we actually started to Illinois December 31st.
I mean, it was right
And
after.
yeah, yeah, we had some rough times, me and Brian, and some legal issues that were actually worked out at that time, and it provided guaranteed money till the end of the patent, and if they wanted to keep it, and and so we we set out for Illinois because I could provide you guys a much better quality of life in Illinois than I could in New York. New York's very expensive to live in. A lot
Yeah,
of
New York and California, extremely expensive.
so so yeah, we left, and so now I'm working on a similar process actually to that, but much improved, and I've got some licenses out, and I'll say one thing: I would have these processes completed years ago and in business if I assigned the patents like I had before.
Sure.
But it's so much harder when you won't assign the patent because they.
The bureaucracy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just it's difficult to raise the money and to get everything to
To
actually work
to to align
together,
and go forward. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a harder, it's a big learning experience, but I am not going to sign any more patents. I mean, these patents that I have now are just absolutely tremendous. So
Yeah. You've had a lot of interesting people, involved with the company, actors that have invested and different and different and other kinds of business people.
well, that's right. We kind of passed that up. That was the wastewater treatment. That was basswood.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh,
No, there's a
yeah,
lot
I
of things you've
actually
worked
designed
on.
that process in 1992, and I didn't do anything with it because I worked on changing world technologies with CWT a bit initially, and we built the pilot plant in Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. You probably remember
Yeah,
that.
I do
Built
remember.
a plant in Carthage, Missouri, just as I was leaving the company, and so when I got to Rantoul, I started trying to raise money and put together a company to do the wastewater treatment. And Woody Harrelson and Ed Norton got interested in that. So Joe and I ran all over the United States and Canada, and talking to people about raising money, and we did. We raised, I don't know, we raised, I think, probably initially probably only raised like about $1 million, but altogether from the people that we raised money or we got to put money in, I think they eventually, by the time that we finished in Glasgow and stuff, and nearly put $3 million in, and I was up in southern Illinois at that time, again in the Golconda area.
Yeah.
And I had a lab set up, and they raised the money to build I think around 2008 to build the first plant in Houston, Texas.
Texas, yeah. It was a Dr. Pepper plant.
Yeah, the Dr. Pepper plant.
To process the wastewater from the plant.
Really tremendous. It's a great wastewater treatment. But interestingly enough, I have an even better wastewater treatment patent that I was allowed, I think it was in March or April, something like that.
Of this year?
Of this year. And I just had another one allowed on the same wastewater treatment system that which I think is going to be published in September or somewhere around there, September, October. And then and then there's another patent that we just filed on it that ties the thermal treatment to it. So
I think the wild thing about inventions and technology is, of course, people get really excited about a piece of technology that is being worked on and refined and then made into something. But technology can always be made better and always improved upon, it seems like. And even though something may, become mainstream for a while, it always goes through some sort of refinement and an evolution to become even better. And that's what you're essentially talking about is you can.
Yeah, and for anybody that ever listens to this, don't let anybody ever tell you that everything's been invented now and that there's no way you'll get a patent on something. If you think you have a good idea, you just follow through with it because the chances are that you will get that patent. I haven't gotten every patent that I've filed for, but I've gotten probably 90% of them. So.
Sure. Well, I mean, you've made your living doing this, and it's interesting work. You don't run into a lot of people that tinker with things and try to design stuff that people you usually dream about. People dream about or just do a lot of testing, and research with till they get something right. Are some of this new stuff though now that you're working on, is that something you can speak a little bit about, or the companies you want to share a little bit about those things?
A little bit. They've all been really slowed down because of COVID. I say that
of course
not been a good situation. But even so, during this COVID thing, I've signed 2 license agreements. Now they're not performing yet; they're not paying me. But one was supposed to pay money on July 31st, which just passed, and
the world's come to a stop.
They're assuring me that they're going to make that payment. So they'll have 30 days, and then I'll send them a notification. But at any rate, I've got a license out for a thermal process and a digester, which ties the digesters and the thermal process together for manures and waste from animal processing facilities, like similar to the system we built in Carthage, Missouri, for Butterball turkey in Conagra.
It's to reduce waste, but also to make something from the waste.
Yeah, yeah, and we're looking at all kinds of stuff to make from the waste.
Energy.
Energy is an easy thing to do, but energy is not the most valuable thing. We
No,
can
yeah.
actually cook that at just the right temperature, and we make a whole spectrum of fatty acids. And depending on the temperature and the pressure that we do it at, you can make bigger chains of fatty acids or shorter chains, and then we can extract that fatty acid out because I have that extraction process.
Explain to people
And
what the fatty acids are good for.
animal feed, industry, acetic acid and succinic acid are used in plastic polymer industry, making acrylonitrols. I don't know if it's HDPE, but just different
Just different
plastic
things. Yeah.
polymers, yeah.
Polymers.
And that has a host of other industrial uses for you know, maintaining pH, buffering pH, all sorts of things.
It's amazing.
So it's hard to list everything that they're good for, but they have industrial and food base. So especially for animals, we can cook it. It's far above any temperature that any bacteria are going to live through. It's like way above sterilization temperature, which is 250 degrees Fahrenheit and 15 psi. We're like 250 degrees C, 500. Well, actually, I guess it's only about 200 degrees C or around 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sure.
And much higher pressure than 15 psi. There's just no life that's going to survive that. So the fatty acids that come out, even though they may come from manure and come from deteriorating animal pieces and parts and things like that, the fatty acids are going to be good, high value fatty acids they could be used in food.
That's great.
Not human food, but animal.
No, animal food. Yeah. Well, I would like for people to be able to reach you. Do you have a website or information that you'd like to provide?
We have Draconis extractiontechnologies.com and Draconis Digester.
How do you spell Draconis?
Draconas.
Okay. I thank you, Dad, though, for being on. I don't want to keep you too long. We can always do this again and focus on something specific,
Yeah, anytime.
But I thank you for being on the show, and